everyone, hope you're doing well. Today we are looking at another vehicle for the upcoming Battle Pass in War Thunder, and this is the E.B.R. 1963. Looks like they're going with the same set of ideas that they have previous Battle Passes, at least for now. So with 2 ground vehicles, 1 plane, and also 1 naval vehicle. And the E.B.R. will be the second of the ground vehicles. It's going to be a rank 4 premium vehicle. So it's not going to be just an event vehicle. You will get premium bonuses with this, which is pretty nice. It's obviously a light tank and pretty similar to the vehicle that we got in the winter event earlier on. But at the same time, it does have some key differences, meaning that it should have some uniqueness to it. Anyway, let's get into the history of this vehicle. So the story of the E.B.R. 1963 starts with its predecessor, which of course was developed starting in 1945 by Panhard Leversor on the basis of a pre-war prototype armored car. The chassis would of course be of an 8-wheel layout, with the first and final wheel sets being steerable, and inside those wheel sets you would have 2 in the center, which actually would have uplifting wheels made out of metal. The reason for this was to have more traction off-road, because one of the general issues that was seen when it came to wheeled vehicles is when they were in terrain which was quite hard to traverse, this is where they would struggle. You know, that's where tracks were much more useful. This was a way to try and solve that. And also you'd be able to bring the wheels up if you were on road surfaces to be able to move around. The vehicle's transmission is also designed so it would have the same speed going forwards as it would backwards, and most vehicles of the series did have an additional driver post at the rear, so therefore you could quick change between them, similar to other vehicles that are around. And in total, over the years of production, there were around about 1,200 E.B.Rs made and built, and with almost all of them being equipped with the swinging turret of the FL-10 type and a 75mm caliber gun, so pretty much the one that we have in game. And then in 1963, there was a modernization program which was adopted. This included replacing the gun with a more powerful 90mm CN90 F2, and within this program, about 650 of the vehicles were modernized. And for a long time, the E.B.R. served as the main armored car of the French army, and was also actively supplied to satellites of France on the African continent, so stuff such as Portugal and also Indonesia. The combat vehicle took part in a number of armed conflicts, such as the War of Independence in Algeria, the Colonial War of Portugal, and also the war in the Western Sahara, and many more. And the E.B.R. was in service with the French until the 1970s, and also in a number of African countries, the vehicle was in service even beyond the 2000s, showing that it definitely had its time in the sun. The E.B.R. 1963 shares a lot of characteristics with the vehicle that we have in War Thunder under the same name. The chassis is pretty much exactly the same. The turret is also very similar. The only thing that is really different about it that matters is, of course, the gun. The gun being the 90mm, meaning that it's going to get access to Heat FS and also HE. So this gun will be able to pack a bit more of a punch when it comes to penetration, but generally I thought when it came to the standard E.B.R, its gun was very good for what it was able to do. The idea was to be a flank and spank tank, or even just shoot straight through enemies, and you can tell by the fact that the E.B.R has been raised in BR so much over the period of time that it's been doing pretty well. And I feel like the E.B.R 1963, it may actually have a deficit because of its Heat FS instead of just having the standard gun. The fact that it will have Heat FS means that it will have a much higher BR, therefore its mobility won't matter as much, and other factors will have to come into play to actually boost the vehicle. It's still going to be able to scout, which is very important. That's something that should never be overlooked. Scouting is a mechanic which is very, very useful in the game, and hopefully more people will generally use it. And at the same time, The fact is, this thing is still pretty mobile in ideal conditions. When it has to deal with stuff such as heavy snow or heavy sand in the game, then yes, it's not very maneuverable at all. But then again, not many wheeled vehicles are. But when it comes to being on asphalt or when it comes to being on dry ground, this thing can motor around at a hell of a rate of knots. One of the weaknesses of this thing is its survivability. It isn't great, let's be honest. It doesn't have a lot of armor. I think the maximum amount on it in any places is around about 50 millimeters, which is on the front of the turret. Most people just shoot the chassis in the center of it and take out the turret and then annihilate the thing. The fact is, when we have a look at something like the E.B.R, it's not built for survivability, it's built for mobility and also firepower. So hopefully people can use that well. Hopefully the gun depression is good enough on the gun to be able to be useful, because that's another issue with something like the oscillating turret. I'm sure it will be. It should be fine. It should have similar gun depression to the 75 millimeter variants that we already have. But the E.B.R, when it first came into game, came in and was incredibly good. It was way under the B.R it should be, and I believe it's got either 2 or 3 separate B.R increases over the time. And I feel like now with the E.B.R 1963 coming in, they're probably going to be a little bit more cautious when it comes to the addition of this machine in general. So the other thought to this as well is, so this is the main Battle Pass vehicle, or I feel like this is going to be the main Battle Pass vehicle for a lot, and because, you know, a lot of people play ground, not just exclusively, but, you know, it's a decent chunk of the player base. But I feel since they've announced this one now, normally you leave the best to last. So it does give me hope that either there's an amazing ship or there's an amazing plane that's in the works, and maybe that's going to be the main Battle Pass vehicle. If not, if this is the level 75 one, I think this is an adequate vehicle. You know, it's a premium, it's something to use to grind through the French tech tree. The French tech tree has a ton of really nice vehicles in it. It has a ton of really nice BRs, which is really cool. So having a vehicle to get through that is a really nice thing. But at the same time, one of the things that kind of annoys me is the uniqueness of this. So in the earlier year, in Operation Winter, we got the standard E.B.R, the one with the 75 and the one that many people would have noticed. And now, with the fact that we're getting the kind of later variant of the E.B.R, which is going to be very similar in general playstyle of the standard E.B.R, it just feels like you're just getting, no, it's obviously not a copy and paste vehicle, but it's very, very similar to it in terms of how it's actually going to play. And I would have much preferred this to be like a standard tech tree vehicle and then get something a little bit more unique. It kind of reminds me of when we had all of those events where you could get the Macarva, and then the Macarva Mark II, and then the Macarva Mark III. It just felt like we were going down a road where everything was going to be this one, you know, type of vehicle, and this is what was going to be the event stuff. I'm kind of sad to see the E.B.R 1963 instead of something like the LC projects, for example, like the AMX ELC BIS. I think that would have been a much more interesting vehicle going forward than the E.B.R. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of people looking forward, you know, to this E.B.R because of the strengths of the first one. But I don't think it's a hook, line, and sinker when it comes to the Battle Pass for me. I don't think it's unique enough. I don't think it's really interesting enough. And to be honest with you, as somebody who's ground out a lot of the French tech tree, there's a ton of vehicles in it which are really fun. There's a ton of vehicles in it which definitely warrant playing. And the question is, are you going to use something like this to grind through it to try and get to some of those vehicles? Because rank 1 and 2 France, specifically rank 1 France is not very fun. It's a very bad experience. But after you get past that, you end up not having too bad experiences at all. They have a lot of really good lineups. They have a lot of really good stuff. And as I said, the question is it worth getting something like the E.B.R. to be able to research through all that stuff? And maybe it is, maybe it isn't. This is pretty much on the same level as something like the M6 that we had from the last Battle Pass, so it'll be interesting to see how people react to this compared to the M6. Lovely to see a minor nation get more represented with higher event vehicles though. That is a big positive, and hopefully that continues. It's something that we've talked about quite a lot, and something which will hopefully diversify people playing different tech trees in the game. And yeah, hopefully people enjoy this E.B.R. For me, it won't be that useful. It's an extra light tank which I can scout with, which is nice, but I'm sure many others are going to have a great time with this. I hope you all have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next time. I'd like to thank BRFC, Swollen Ostrich, Teddy, John Ryman, Universe A, Conte Baraka, Eugens Terry, Ambrosius McClellan, Daniel Stanton, Martinez, B. Young, Lafouche, Barine, and Samuel Schlick for supporting the channel.